House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
Half a day, my friends, and that is the operative word today. Because here on House to Home, we are all about friendship. And when we, bring in learned experts who really know their stuff and pass on information to you, I mean, that's all good and everything like that. When they're really, really nice local people, like our friend Howard Gutierrez, it's just bonus and everything like that. It also helps that like Howard and I are like doppelgangers for each other. I actually get mistaken for Howard out in the field, which is a really good thing. So, Howard, it's good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, Jason.
All
I
right,
love
and,
it.
and and we totally appreciate the insight and the perspective you bring, especially in our conversation today, because Gina wanted to bring you on specifically with Gina's request. And Gina knows a lot of people, but when she said Howard's joining in, we're going to cover some cool stuff. So we are talking about appraisal. So Gina, maybe set the table for us, and what are we going to talk about appraisals? And are there any particular like issues that have arisen?
Well, after 37 plus years of doing real estate, Howard recently did an appraisal for me in Agania Heights. And during that particular appraisal, I learned something that I had not known before. He actually brought up an issue about the easement. And I just took it for granted that that the surveyor and the realtors check for those things, but I didn't realize that the appraiser does as well. And he actually pointed out something at that point when he went to do the appraisal report. The survey work wasn't done yet, and the map that I had on me, it wasn't clear to me that the easement was coming in from behind the home. I couldn't tell from the map I had, and the owner just took it for granted that the way she was driving in, she never mentioned that there were any special arrangements about this particular property. So when Howard was doing the appraisal and he pointed out some stuff and called me and said, "Did you check this? Did you check that?" I was like, "Hey, wait a minute. I didn't even know this was part of an appraisal report." And then he pointed out that this is a VA appraisal. And we went from there. And I learned a lot from this particular report. So that's why I thought, it's good for all of us to learn this. And we invited him on.
Outstanding. So Howard, let me give some context and everything. Do you see your role as particularly someone who, goes into a piece of property, and I mean you could be optimist or pessimist depending on what your perspective is, and say, I see all the existing and potential value this piece of property has, or do you basically say, okay, I'm gonna go through and be quality control agent and just check off and like, assign demerits? Like how do you actually see your when you go out and make an appraisal?
So the lines get kind of blurred. First off, I always tell people, I just had a conversation with one of my clients, and I told him we are not a home inspection company. And I'm telling him because he was buying a type of house that didn't have a concrete roof. It was sort of a Radva design. And I told him that, hey, this has an attic. You should really take a look at, try and get a home inspection. That way, you know what you're getting into because you're talking about a 30-year mortgage. So sometimes customers think that we're the full package. Like we're going to tell them if they have plumbing issues, or we're going to tell them if they have leaks, or we're going to tell them if the foundation's cracking. And really, we tell them, our primary goal is to appraise a property, which is in layman's term to tell the homeowner or the bank what somebody else is more likely willing to pay for the same property. Because the bank, on one hand, wants to protect their investment, and then on the other hand, the buyers want to make sure that they're not paying for more than somebody else is willing to pay for the same property.
Mm.
Hey,
Um,
Howard,
that,
Howard, can,
yep.
can I just ask you a quick question? You made the distinction between the bank and the buyer, the homeowner. Who do you really work for? And this is in particular to VA appraisals. Who are you really working for?
Yeah, so when somebody is at the bank and they're applying for a loan and we get the appraisal request, we work for the bank.
Mm.
The homeowner or the borrower pays for the appraisal, but our client is the bank. And so a lot of times I used to have a problem explaining that to the homeowner because they would call me up and they'd say, "Oh, can I get a copy of the appraisal?" And I would tell them, "Oh, you have to get it from the bank. I cannot give that to you. My client is a bank," and they wouldn't understand because they'd be like, "Well, I'm the one paying for it."
Yeah.
And then I just tell them, "Hey, if you're gonna let your friend borrow money and to take it as collateral, he was gonna, put a lien on his truck. Who would care more about value? It would be the person lending the money to make sure that the truck had enough value to cover just in case the payments weren't made. So in a loan, our client is the person who is requesting it, the appraisal. And usually in home loans or mortgages, that is the lender.
Got it. Okay, that's good for people to know. You're right. We don't clearly understand that. Now, I think Liz had some other questions too, right, Liz, about yeah.
Yes, with the VA appraisal, what's so different about a VA appraisal and a regular appraisal for a residence?
Mainly when you have different types of loan structures, VAs, FHA, USDA, and then regular Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae loans. And what happens is anytime the federal government or government agency takes part in the loan process, they usually put on more restrictions. So your restrictions from a USDA, FHA, or a VA varies greatly, whereas a regular Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, it's a little bit lax. And then if you go to local banks and they give you a portfolio loan where it's an in-house loan, those are even more lax. So all of the restrictions are put on by the lenders. So VA would be sort of like the first step up where they require certain aspects to be checked: hot water, toilets flushing, water pressure, safety issues such as no exposed electrical wiring. And then if we go up further to an FHA or USDA, those get even stricter, where I did one USDA loan where, like many homes on Guam, people like to do some planting and potting. And this one lady had pots all around her house. And when I took a picture of the house and I sent it off to the USDA, they came back with a bunch of questions. Is she running a business out of her house? Why isn't she taking care of her yard? I had one picture where you could see a spare tire leaning up against the side wall of the house. And the USDA had them take that tire off of the property. So
Wow.
it varies in how strict they are. And primarily the reason why the USDA does have the strictest requirements is because they're usually loaning to people that can't qualify for a standard mortgage. So they have higher financing, like 90, 95%. They have lower interest rates. So when they give somebody the house, they want to make sure that the house is good shape. They won't immediately have to put in $5,000 to fix something or to repaint the house. And they also want the house to be in good shape, because the way that they think is that if we give them a house that is in great shape, then there's going to be a lot more home pride, and people are going to want to take care of the homes more. And and those are just regulations that they have. So every government loan or government-backed loan has different and varying requirements.
Hang on one second, Howard, because based on this amazing knowledge you've passed on. Hey Siri, remind me when I get home to move the tire from the wall of the house.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that is the point, right? Because simple little things like that may either be an oversight, or you may just think, well, everybody does it and everything. That has a direct and tangible impact on value. And you as an appraiser, that comes out, and those are the things that you look for, right?
Well, okay, so like for that instance with the tire leaning on the side of the house or the potted plants, those don't have impacts on value.
Okay.
Yeah, because as appraisers, we're able to distinguish between real estate and personal property. And no value for personal property. Just because you have a junk car in your driveway, that's not going to bring down the value of your house. The main reason why that's usually done for USDA is when we send the appraisal off, it gets reviewed by somebody in rural Idaho or rural or suburban Ohio. And you're talking about CC&Rs. The 500 homes, and you get two different styles to choose from. You have 3 colors. You can paint your house. You can't park your car in your driveway for more than 15 hours. They have all of these rules. So then when somebody comes from that background and they're looking at photos of a house on Guam that doesn't have that same cultural aspects, then, then they sort of go, what's going on here? Why does he have junk in his yard? And we're like, that's not junk. We don't throw things away on Guam because we could use it later.
Oh God, Howard,
So,
please tell me you forwarded a picture like at some point in your career to one of those federal people in Idaho of like, like the outside kitchen and like how we have to have a tendency to take like the spigot and then we attach like the little hose
yeah,
for the
yeah.
sink. Oh
Yeah.
God, it probably drives them nuts.
The best thing to use for that, for those outdoor sinks with the spigots, the water balloons,
Yeah.
where you get a pack and it has all those points, and then you just turn it on and you get 500 water balloons.
Mhm.
Those are the best for those outdoor spigots.
Okay. Pro tip.
Yeah, there you go.
Really, really
That's
good.
a tip I would never have gone anywhere else except on this show. Oh, Howard, I wanted to ask you about one other thing and this is the thing I love most about VA reports. And I think this kind of differentiates a VA report from other appraisals is that I remember a rule that if the appraiser can anticipates that there's going to be an issue with the value ahead of time, if you're already working your numbers and you can see that there's going to be an issue with the valuation, my understanding is you'll notify your client who is essentially the lender, and the lender has the ability to reach out and say, hey, we're having problems with the appraisal value here. We have to figure this out. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and those are called tidewaters. And what I think the VA tried to do there was preempt, because in a VA loan, appraisals are used as guidelines because the ultimate lender is the federal government that backs these loans. So when we issue the VA will look at the appraisal report, and then they would issue what they call an NOV. And an NOV is a notice of value. And this is what I've heard in the past, is that the NOV could be lower or higher than what the appraisal value is. So if the appraiser values a house at 300,000, the NOV could come in lower, or it could come in higher. Because again, these loans are backed by the federal. So oftentimes, if the value of the home is at 300,000, you'll see mortgages recorded at 312,000, because they're able to finance origination fees, are able to do 100% financing above the value of the home.
Oh, that's
So
another distinction about VA, correct?
yes,
Is you can
yes.
add in some of your fees.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially if
fantastic.
they get 95 or 100% financing.
We can also provide additional data that you may not have to help have you reevaluate the property, correct?
Yes, yes. If there's comparable sales that aren't on MLS, or if there's private sales that took place that weren't known, especially in subdivisions or in condos, sometimes sales go through and they're between private individuals and they're just not known to the public.
Okay,
But the
Howard, I
real
got a question. So once you do your assessment and your appraisal, is the is the rate or is the price at which someone might want to pay for that property, is that at that point public domain, or could a buyer or seller ascertain that if you are, working specifically for the bank, as you said?
valuations are only released to the bank.
Mhm.
So as far as what we value it is and whatever is in the appraisal report, that is only released to the client. So my wife gets this often. Somebody will come up to her and be like, "Hey, I just saw your husband. He was over at my house. He just did my appraisal." And she's like, "Oh, I didn't know." And they're like, "Oh, he didn't tell you?" And it's sort of like, because that's a private thing. We don't go around telling people what we're there for. Even when we're out in the field and people go, "Oh, what are you doing here?" Like a neighbor might come by as we're walking onto the property and what are you doing here? And we're like, "Oh, we're just meeting with Mr. So-and-so." And that's the most that we go through. So we keep the privacy of all the individuals. I think we do not share values. We cannot do that. Now, what somebody is willing to pay for a property or what they close their loan as, that can become public information if you know how to do recording fees and everything. But for the most part, Guam doesn't make their I
Yeah.
forget the term,
Yeah.
public
The
information.
sold close price is not
Yeah.
public record. But
Yeah.
you know what you can do is you can call your favorite realtor and we'll look it up for you.
There you go. So okay, so for boys and girls, for those of you watching and trying to be like slick and everything, and to just say, okay, I'll if I see Howard around my neighborhood, I'll let him do his thing and everything, and then you're gonna jump on MLS in your favorite web browser and look it up. That is not like the same value that he may have come up with and everything. So yeah, just call Liz and Gina and they'll figure it out for you.
We can't even tell the seller what that appraisal is if the buyer wants to keep that private. If the comes out, sellers would, well, what did it come out as? We're not authorized to give that information unless the buyer authorizes it or the bank authorizes it.
Mhm. I think that's fair too, given the bank's position of like how much they're going to like lend out, because I mean that's their peace of mind too from their standpoint, right, Howard?
Mhm. Yeah. And for the most part, we forget that banking is a business. So the bank has to protect their loans and their assets in the same way that retail stores would protect their goods and services.
Absolutely. How long does it take to actually do your assessment? Because like you said, I mean, interesting choice of words, but you kick the tires and you do a very thorough job on determining, like how much a piece of property, like what the shape of it is and everything. Like you said, the electrical, the infrastructure, the main structure, the easements and everything like that. How long does it take you to go through a garden variety piece of residential property here on the island?
Well, that's the thing on Guam is there's no garden variety, right? I mean,
A good
you
point.
could
Yeah.
have a 600 square foot home right next to their cousin that built their 3,500 square foot mansion, all in the same block and all on the same area. You could have, if you go down to Maritza, they have 600 square foot homes built on the beach line that was built in 1950 or 1960, right next to the 3,000 square foot home that was just built in 2015. So there's really no garden variety unless you go to some of the newer subdivisions like Paradise Estates or one of those subdivisions. Then it goes there. But then even those are no longer garden variety because some people put 4 CMU walls, some people already extended, some of them built large porches, added generators. So all of those things makes it really hard to sort of people ask, I get all the phone calls all the time. Hey, could you just tell me what you think my house will sell? And I tell them somewhere between somewhere between $1 and 5 million. And
That just proves that you are a true professional and you're really, really good at what you do. And that's why we had you on the show, because every business transaction is unique and you can't just say, okay, I'm going to go to some property in Sinahania, 15 minutes, I'm in and out. You're going to basically say this transaction is its own animal and I'm going to, take however long it takes to do a thorough job.
That's
yes,
right.
I tell all my clients because as soon as I get out there and I'm done, they'll stop me and they say, okay, so how much is it worth? And I tell them, I say, if I was able to do that, you'd be pretty angry about paying my fee.
And that's a great sales pitch.
Yeah.
And
So.
and there is a timeline though, right? Howard, you do have when an appraisal report is ordered from an appraisal company. I mean, you do have a time schedule of when to produce that report.
Yes. So every different type of loan. So like a VA, there's a standard timeline. Different banks will give us requests or appraisal assignments based on whether or not we can fulfill it within a certain time frame. So, and that has a lot to do. One, if you're talking about VAs, FHAs, or USDAs, those guidelines are usually set by certain federal standards and guidelines that they have. So there's some guidelines where as soon as a client makes a request for a loan, there's like 60-day guidelines where they have to meet certain criteria. Otherwise, the FDIC will come in and fine them or do whatever. So all the guidelines are all set. So, but then sometimes certain appraisals are hard, appraising a 400 square foot beachfront property versus a 3,000 square foot beachfront property. You're talking, different things that add value to the property at different times where, 2 years ago when interest rates were low, your buying power was really strong. So we saw big increases in larger homes, whereas now you're seeing more increases in smaller homes. So the market is always changing, and certain times in certain times or years, we'll see some appraisers easier to do than others. like a 1,500 square foot home versus a 2,000 square foot home. And those all lead to timeframes that it takes for us to accomplish an appraisal or complete an appraisal. But for the most part, all the banks have theirs done. But the average or standard appraisal is usually about anywhere from 10 to 15 working days.
That's Howard Gutierrez, everybody, international man of mystery.
How long is an appraisal good, Howard, when you do it for the VA?
So appraisals are usually good for just right off the bat 6 months. So there's a 6-month expiration date on any appraisal. But a bank can choose to use any appraisal that they want, as long as it fits within their FDIC guidelines. But they do have things that are called appraisal recertification. So if we do an appraisal and for some reason closing takes longer than 6 months, the bank can call us and order a recertification, which is basically paperwork saying the value hasn't gone up or down in the past 3 months that you haven't closed your loan yet. So there's ways around them.
Okay, good to know. It's a lot of information.
Right. And obviously you really, really love your work. And this is very gratifying to you to know that you're actually part of the process.
Oh yeah. I get to see everybody's homes and it's wonderful. And my favorite part of the job is seeing what people do before and after renovations or different ways that they've extended their homes and done things, so I love it because as soon as I walk into somebody's homes, everything starts going off, I look at different ways that people use different tiles. We all work with the same tiles at Home Depot or JK or any of the other ones, but then when you see how people change them and mix them and use them, I get to see the creative side of people when they renovate their homes.
Okay, let's end on this, Howard. What is something that a prospective seller of a property, what is one thing that they can have in their home that really just warms your heart? The one thing that what is the one thing that really just delights an appraiser when they walk into a piece of property?
I think, getting whenever people get away from the standard developer side. So I recently did an appraisal where it was a newer renovation, and rather than just going for the straight granite countertops, they actually did a mosaic of 4-inch tiles for their countertop. And it was sort of like a throwback to 1975, 1980.
Yeah.
And
I remember those.
And it looked great. It looked amazing because it was like an outdoor kitchen. And, you could just tell that they had a lot of character in it. So, yeah. So that was that really warmed my heart.
Okay. And I'm not even gonna go ahead and ask if the screen door that I have on my old apartment that had those big 1970s peacocks. They were big back then, but I know they're not very popular now.
Yeah, to each its own, right?
Yeah.
People might like it.
Well, Howard, Matt, we really appreciate your expertise and your insight and just your passion for what you do, because it really does make the real estate industry here as positive as it is. So thank you, bro.
Oh, thank you so much.
So much, Howard.
Thank you, guys.
House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.